The morning I turned 19, I walked out of St. Catherine's home for children with everything I owned stuffed into a canvas duffel bag. $217 in crumpled bills, a high school diploma with my name printed in black ink, and absolutely no idea what came next. The spring air hit my face as the heavy doors closed behind me for the last time. I stood there on the concrete steps, watching the other kids through the window, eating breakfast in the cafeteria. Some of them waved. Most of them didn't look up. They knew what this moment meant. They knew that once you aged out, you became a ghost. Someone who used to exist in their world but didn't anymore. My caseworker, Linda, had tried her best to prepare me. She'd spent months teaching me how to budget money, how to fill out job applications, how to open a bank account. She'd printed out lists of resources in shelters and food banks, highlighting the important phone numbers with yellow marker. But there's no class that teaches you how to handle the crushing weight of realizing you're completely alone in the world. No worksheet that explains what to do when you really understand, that there isn't a single person on this planet who is obligated to care whether you live or die. I spent my first night of freedom in a motel room outside Brattleboro. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple next door arguing about money. The ceiling had water stains that looked like continents on a map. The whole place smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution. And I lay there on the scratchy bedspread, staring at those strange shapes above me, wondering if this was what the rest of my life would feel like. Empty, untethered, forgotten. The ceiling had water stains that looked like continents on a map. The whole place smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution. And I lay there on the scratchy bedspread, staring at those strange shapes above me, wondering if this was what the rest of my life would feel like. Empty, untethered, forgotten. I had a plan, or at least the skeleton of one. Get a job. Any job. Save money. Find an apartment. Build something resembling a normal life. The plan sounded reasonable when I'd written it down in Linda's office. Her encouraging nods making me believe I could actually do this. The plan fell apart within a week. I applied everywhere I could think of in town. The gas station on Route 9, the grocery store with the flickering sign, 3 different fast food restaurants, the library where a kind woman with grey hair took my application and told me they'd be in touch, her eyes full of pity she was trying to hide. Nobody called. The problem was always the same. No permanent address, no references except my caseworker. No work history beyond washing dishes in the group home kitchen. I was a blank space in human form, asking people to take a chance on someone who existed in no system, no database, no network of connections that might vouch for her. My $217 lasted 11 days, if I counted carefully. Gas station, sandwiches wrapped in plastic. Coffee from the free dispenser at the church on Main Street. Nights in my car when I couldn't afford another motel room. Curled up in the back seat of my beat-up Honda Civic with a sleeping bag I'd gotten from the donation bin at St. Catherine's. I showered at the YMCA in town, paying the daily fee until even that became too expensive. Then I started washing up in gas station bathrooms, splashing water on my face and running wet paper towels under my arms, trying to look presentable enough that someone might hire me. The humiliation of it sat heavy in my chest, but I told myself it was temporary. Something would break my way eventually. I just had to hold on a little longer. 3 weeks after leaving St. Catherine's, my luck changed in a way I never could have predicted. I was parked in a church parking lot, the same church that let me take free coffee in the mornings. The pastor had noticed me by then. He'd started leaving sandwiches in the fellowship hall with little notes that said, "For anyone who needs them." I knew they were for me. I was too proud to thank him and too hungry to refuse. My phone rang just after noon. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway because I'd been giving it out to every business in a 30 meters radius, hoping someone might finally say, "Yes. Yes, Tirem." The voice on the other end was female, professional, carefully neutral. "Yes, this is Ren. My name is Vivian Ashford. I'm an attorney in Burlington. I'm calling regarding the estate of Harriet Calloway." I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a moment, certain I'd misheard. Estate attorney. These were words from someone else's life. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number. You're Ren, correct? Aged out of St. Catherine's Home for Children approximately 3 weeks ago. Something cold moved through my stomach. How do you know that?" Miss Calloway's will was very specific. Vivian Ashford said, "I need to meet with you in person regarding an inheritance. Are you available this week?" I almost laughed. My schedule was nothing but empty days stretching toward an uncertain future, but the word inheritance didn't make sense. I had no family, no distant relatives sending Christmas cards, no long-lost connections who might have remembered me in their final wishes. I don't know anyone named Harriet Calloway. I understand your confusion. I'll explain everything when we meet. Can you come to Burlington on Tuesday? My office is on College Street. Every instinct the first developed in 19 years of foster care told me this was a scam. Someone had figured out I was desperate and alone, and they were going to ask me to pay processing fees or fake taxes. They drain whatever was left in my account and disappear. But something in Vivian Ashford's voice sounded legitimate. Official, like a door opening onto a room I hadn't known existed. "Okay," I heard myself say, "I'll be there Tuesday." The drive to Burlington took 2 hours through winding Vermont roads. Mountains rose green on either side of the highway, still patched with snow at the higher elevations, even though it was late March. I drove past farms and forests and small towns with white church steeples. And the whole time I kept rehearsing what I would say when this turned out to be nothing. Vivian Ashford's office was in a historic brick building downtown. The kind of place with tall windows and polished hardwood floors where you felt like you should whisper and walk softly. A receptionist led me to a conference room with leather chairs and a view of Lake Champlain glittering in the distance. Vivian was already waiting. A woman in her early 60s with steel grey hair pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She stood when I entered, shook my hand firmly, and offered me coffee. I accepted because I hadn't eaten that morning except for a package of crackers from a vending machine. "Thank you for coming," she said, settling into a chair across from me. She had a thick folder in front of her, and she placed her hands flat on top of it, like she was preparing to deliver news that would change the shape of the world. "I still don't understand why I'm here." Vivian nodded slowly. Harriet Calloway was a sheep farmer. Her property is about 40 minutes outside of Burlington, in the hills near Huntington. She kept to herself mostly, but everyone in the community knew her. Reliable, kind, the type of person who would help anyone who needed it without expecting anything in return. Okay. She died 6 weeks ago, at the age of 78. Heart attack while she was working in her barn. She had no spouse, no children, and no living relatives that we've been able to locate. I waited, my fingers wrapped around the warm coffee cup. In her will, which she updated 2 years before her death, she left everything she owned to the next child, who aged out of St. Catherine's home after her passing. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them individually. Next child, aged out, St. Catherine's, but they refused to assemble into meaning. I don't understand. Vivian's expression softened. Miss Calloway grew up in the foster care system herself. She spent her entire adult life building something stable and good from nothing. And she wanted to give that same chance to someone who'd had a rough start, but she didn't know me. No, she didn't. Then why would she give me anything? Vivian opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of a handwritten letter, the script angular and careful. She left this explanation with her will. I picked up the paper with trembling hands. I know what it's like to have nothing and no one. I know what it feels like to walk out of a building with everything you own in a bag, knowing that nobody in the world is waiting for you. I built this farm from that nothing. I built a life. And when I'm gone, I want someone else to have the chance I gave myself. Not because they earned it. Not because they deserve it more than anyone else, but because everyone deserves at least one door that opens when all the others are closed. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, dropping onto the polished conference table. The prop consists of 63 à Heartland, Vivian and gentle now. A 2-story farmhouse that needs some work, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a flock of approximately 140 sheep. I looked up at her, unable to speak. There's also a savings account with nearly $18,000, enough to cover property taxes and basic expenses for at least a year, if you're careful. She reached into the folder and produced a set of keys. Old ones, the brass, worn, smooth from decades of use. She slid them across the table, and they made a small sound against the wood that seemed to echo in the quiet room. The farm is yours, Wren. Everything Harriet Calloway spent her life building. She wanted you to have it. I took the keys with shaking hands and walked out of that office, feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's story. The drive to the farm took me through country roads I'd never traveled before. Stone walls lined the route, built by hands that had been dead for centuries. Sugar maples towered overhead, their branches just beginning to show the first pale green of spring. When I finally turned down the long gravel driveway, I had to pull over and just sit there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. The farmhouse was white with green shutters, sitting on a small rise with a view of rolling hills that seemed to extend forever. The paint was peeling in places, and the porch sagged slightly on one end. But there was something solid about it. Something that said it had weathered storms and seasons, and still remained standing. The barn was weathered red, the color of old bricks, massive and sturdy against the afternoon sky. Fenced pastures spread out on either side of the driveway. And there, moving through the grass like clouds come down to earth, were the sheep, over 100 of them. They were thick and creamy white, catching the late sunlight as they grazed. Some of them looked up as my car crunched over the gravel. Most kept eating, unconcerned by the stranger who had just inherited their home. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. It was also terrifying because I didn't know the first thing about farming or taking care of animals. And I had no idea how I was going to manage any of this alone. I unlocked the farmhouse door and stepped inside. The air smelled like wood smoke and old books. Naanzen, Jules Redin, practicing. A worn leather couch facing a stone fireplace. A kitchen table with mismatched chairs, shelves lined with farming books and almanacs, their spines cracked from use. There were photographs on the mantel, pictures of sheep at county fairs, blue ribbons pinned to their frames. Landscapes of the farm in different seasons, snow-covered in winter, golden in autumn, lush and green in summer, but no family photos, no smiling faces gathered around a holiday table. Harriet Calloway had lived here alone for decades. She had built this whole life by herself, just like I was going to have to do. In the kitchen, I found a note weighted down by a coffee mug on the counter. The same angular handwriting from the letter Vivian had shown me. To whoever reads this, you've been given a second chance. This land has been good to me, and it will be good to you, if you're willing to work hard and learn. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Shinoli stentotem. There's a journal in the barn office with everything you need to know. Make this place your own. You deserve it. It was signed simply, Harriet. I read that note 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket, where it would stay for months, the paper growing soft from being touched so often. Then I walked out to the barn because I needed to see these sheep that were somehow my responsibility now. The barn was enormous, inside with high ceilings that disappeared into shadow and rows of pens along both walls. The smell hit me first. Wool and hay and something earthier underneath. The scent of animals who had lived in this space for generations. Most of the sheep were outside in the pastures, but a few were in the barn, and one of them was separated from the others, alone in a smaller pen near what looked like an office door. This sheep was different from the rest. While the others had thick, fluffy coats, this one's wool was matted and dirty in places. He was thinner, too, his ribs visible beneath a tangled fleece. But what struck me most were his eyes. Dark and intelligent, almost human in the way they watched me approach. Not afraid, not aggressive, just curious, and maybe a little sad. There was a clipboard hanging on the pen with notes in Harriet's handwriting. The sheep's name was written at the top, Walter. The notes explained that Walter had been rejected by his mother as a lamb. Harriet had bottle-fed him, which meant he'd bonded with humans instead of his own kind. The other sheep had never fully accepted him as part of the flock. He saw himself as different because in the way that mattered to sheep, he was. He'd been sick recently with something called foot rot and was being kept separate while he healed. The last entry was dated just 2 days before Harriet died. Walter's looking better. Should be able to rejoin the flock next week. Keep an eye on him, though. He's special. I reached over the pen gate and Walter came right up to me without hesitation. He pressed his head against my palm and his wool was coarse under my fingers, rougher than I'd expected. He made a soft, bleeding sound that seemed almost conversational, like he was trying to tell me something. I stood there in the fading light of that first evening, my hand on the head of a rejected sheep, and I understood why Harriet had called him special. We were the same, Walter and I. Both of us abandoned by those who should have loved us. Both of us spending our whole lives on the outside, looking in at a world that had decided we didn't belong. I sank down onto a hay bale next to his pen and I started talking to him. I don't know why. It felt ridiculous, even as I did it, but Walter listened. He stood at the gate with his head tilted, those dark eyes fixed on mine. And he made small sounds in response like he understood every word. I told him about growing up in the system, about never having a place that felt like mine, about being scared that I would fail at this and end up right back where I started, sleeping in my car and eating gas station sandwiches. I told him I didn't know how to take care of sheep. I didn't know how to take care of anything. I could barely take care of myself. Walter just kept watching me, and somehow his presence made everything feel less impossible. That night, I slept in Harriet's bed in sheets that still faintly smelled like lavender. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the country at night. Owls calling, wind in the trees, the distant bleating of sheep settling down to sleep. I didn't know it yet, but my life had just begun, and the hardest parts were still to come. The first week on the farm nearly broke me. I woke that first morning to the sound of sheep bleating, a chorus of demands that started before sunrise and didn't stop until I stumbled out of bed, pulled on yesterday's clothes, and made my way to the barn. The feeding instructions in Harriet's journal seemed simple enough. Made out grain, distribute checkwater's chaos. Sheep swarming around me, pushing and shoving, bleating with an urgency that felt like accusation. I got the feeding done eventually, though I spilled half a bag of grain in the process and nearly tripped over a lamb that had somehow gotten into the wrong pen. She was in her mid-40s, with practical short hair in the kind of calm efficiency that comes from decades of dealing with emergencies. She didn't talk down to me, even though it was obvious I had no idea what I was doing. "First things first," she said, walking me through the barn. "Let's check on your flock and see where things stand." She showed me how to examine the sheep for signs of illness, how to check their hooves for rot, how to feel their bellies to see if they might be pregnant. It was overwhelming, the sheer amount of information I needed to absorb just to keep these animals alive. But then she said something that stuck with me. Harriet was in her 30s when she bought this place. She didn't know anything about sheep either. She just had to be willing to learn and not give up when things got hard. That made me feel slightly less hopeless. Every morning for those first weeks, I started with Walter. I'd change his bedding, check his hooves, which were healing well from the foot rot, and just talk to him while I worked. He'd stand at the gate of his pen and watch me with those knowing eyes, making soft sounds that seemed like responses to what I was saying. I know it sounds ridiculous, talking to a sheep like he could understand me. But Walter listened better than most people I'd ever known in my life. He never interrupted, never told me I was overreacting, never looked at me with pity or judgment. He just stayed present with me in a way that felt like genuine companionship. Dr. Bellamy had cleared him to rejoin the flock. So I tried multiple times, but every time I put Walter back with the others, they'd push him away. Sometimes they'd ignore him completely, turning their backs and walking off when he approached. Other times they'd get aggressive, the rams lowering their heads and butting him until he retreated. He'd end up standing alone by the fence while the rest of them grazed together. And the look on his face was so dejected that I couldn't bear it. I'd bring him back to his separate pen, knowing I was probably making things worse by keeping him isolated, but I understood that feeling too well. The feeling of trying to fit in somewhere and being rejected over and over. The feeling of standing on the outside watching everyone else belong to each other while you belong to no one. I couldn't put Walter through that, not when I had the power to spare him. The neighbors started coming by once word got around that someone new had taken over the Calloway place. Hank Donnelly ran the farm to the east. A man in his mid-50s, with weathered hands and a quiet way of speaking. The kind of person who measured his words carefully and meant every one of them. His wife made apple pies that would have won awards if she'd ever bothered to enter them in competitions. Hank helped me fix a section of fence that had rotted through. He showed me how to use Harriet's ancient tractor, which required a specific sequence of steps and a little prayer to get started. He never made me feel stupid for not knowing things that were obvious to him. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said one afternoon, wiping grease from his hands after we'd finally gotten the tractor running. Harriet didn't know any of this either when she first came here. She just kept showing up and doing the work until she figured it out. His daughter, Tessa, was 21, studying agricultural business at the State University. She was confident in a way I envied. And she didn't treat me like I was stupid for not knowing things that seemed obvious to everyone else. She helped me set up a proper bookkeeping system and explained how to apply for grants available to young farmers. "You've got a story," she said one afternoon, looking over the application we were filling out together. Grant committees love stories, especially ones about second chances. Opal Brennan lived to the west with her husband. She was 70 years old with silver hair she wore in a long braid and a garden that put everyone else's to shame. She took one look at my kitchen situation and started bringing me eggs and fresh bread twice a week. She taught me about canning vegetables, insisting I'd need to know it before summer when the garden started producing. But the person who became something like a real friend was Silas. He was 23, worked for a large dairy operation on the property to the south, and had grown up farming. He'd stopped by on his way home from work, sometimes, usually, finding me struggling with something, and he'd just jump in and help without making a big deal about it. We rebuilt the sheep shelter together. For one weekend when part of the roof caved in during a heavy rainstorm, the whole time we worked, he told me stories about growing up in Vermont, about his family's farm that his older brother had inherited, about his dreams of maybe having his own place someday. I told him about St. Catherine's, about aging out with nothing, about this impossible inheritance that had fallen into my lap. He didn't look at me with pity when I talked about my past. He just listened, and then he said something I've never forgotten. Sounds like Harriet knew what she was doing when she wrote that will. She wanted someone who'd understand what this place really means. Silas was the one who finally told me the truth about Walter. We were sitting on the porch one evening after a long day of work, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. I'd been telling him about my latest failed attempt to get Walter accepted by the flock. Bottle-fed sheep almost never successfully reintegrate, he said, not unkindly. They imprint on humans instead of their own kind. The other sheep can tell he's different. They'll never fully accept him. So, what am I supposed to do? You've got 3 options. Keep treating him like a pet, which means permanent separation and a lonely life with just you for company. Or keep pushing to get him back with the flock and accept that it might never work and he'll keep getting hurt in the process. He paused, staring out at the darkening fields. Or the third option, the one farmers usually choose when an animal can't thrive. I felt my jaw tighten. That's not an option. Silas looked at me, then nodded slowly. Figured you'd say that. After he left that night, I went out to the barn and sat with Walter in his pen. I didn't talk this time. I just sat there with my back against the wooden slats. And he came over and lay down next to me, his body warm against my legs. The other sheep were making their evening sounds in the distance. Soft bleeding, the rustle of willows they settled in together for the night. Walter and I were separate from all of it. 2 outsiders who had found each other. I reached down and ran my fingers through his wool, and I made him a silent promise. Whatever happened, I wouldn't give up on him, We'd figure this out together. The afternoon Preston Calloway arrived. I was in the barn trying to repair a broken gate latch. My hands were dirty. My hair was falling out of its ponytail, and I probably smelled like sheep. I heard the car before I saw it. A sleek black sedan that looked completely out of place on the gravel driveway, kicking up dust as it approached. The man who stepped out was in his mid-40s South, wearing clothes that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. He had the look of someone who was used to being important, to being listened to getting exactly what he wanted. He surveyed the property with an expression I couldn't quite read, part appraisal, part something darker. "You must be the orphan," he said when I approached. The word hit like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. "Can I help you?" "I'm Preston Calloway. Harriet was my great-aunt." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I've come to discuss the situation with this property." "There's no situation. The property was left to me by a woman you never met who passed over her actual family to give everything to a stranger." He shook his head slowly like he was explaining something to a child. "You have to understand how that looks. It looks like Harriet's wishes." Preston's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. "My grandfather was her brother. This land has been in the Calloway family for generations. It should have stayed in the family. According to her lawyer, Harriet bought this property herself. It wasn't inherited family land." According to her lawyer, he made the word sound like a joke. "My legal team has a different interpretation." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm giving you the opportunity to walk away with something instead of nothing." He pulled a cards pot to me. "Conde, think about it. We can come to a reasonable arrangement, or we can let the courts decide." I didn't take the card. "I'm not going anywhere." Preston's smile finally faded. "You're 19 years old. You have no money, no education, no family, and no idea how to run a farm. How long do you really think you can hold on here?" "As long as it takes." He studied me for a long moment. Then he tucked the card back into his pocket and turned toward his car. "Trondai Hishol. After that, my lawyers will be in touch." I stood in the driveway and watched him drive away, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I went back to the barn, sat down in Walter's pen, and let myself fall apart. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to take away the only good thing that ever happened to you, you know exactly how Ren felt in that moment. What would you have done in her situation? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because what happens next is going to change everything. Ren is about to face the hardest months of her life. A lawsuit, a disease outbreak, and a moment when she almost loses the only friend she has. But first, she's going to discover something about Harriet that changes how she sees everything. I called Vivian Ashford the next morning. She listened quietly while I explained what had happened, what Preston had said, the threat hanging over everything I was trying to build. "The will is solid," she said when I finished. Harriet was very careful. She knew there might be challenges, so she made sure everything was documented properly. But can he still sue? Anyone can file a lawsuit. Whether they win is a different question. There was a pause on the line. Preston comes from money. He can afford to drag this out for years if he wants to. The question is whether you can afford to fight back. I looked around Harriet's kitchen. The old appliances, the peeling wallpaper, The window that overlooked the pastures where the sheep were grazing in the morning light. What choice do I have? You always have choices, Wren, but I'll tell you this. I knew Harriet for almost 30 years. She didn't make decisions lightly. If she chose you, there was a reason. And if you decide to fight for this place, I'll help you however I can. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time staring at nothing. Then I went outside and got back to work. The months that followed were the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I fell into a rhythm that shaped my days like the banks of a river. Up at 5:30 to feed the sheep and check on the pregnant ewes. Mornings spent on whatever maintenance or repairs the farm demanded, and there was always something. Afternoons for the business side. Learning to manage wool orders and coordinate with the shearer who would come in late spring, updating records in Harriet's meticulous system. Evenings found me in the barn with Walter, sometimes reading aloud from Harriet's collection of farming books. Sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence while he rested his head on the gate and watched me. I was learning that being alone wasn't the same thing as being lonely. Not when you had purpose and responsibility. Not when you had a rejected sheep who seemed to understand you better than most humans ever had. I kept trying to get Walter accepted by the flock, though. Something in me couldn't let go of the hope that maybe, if I just found the right approach, he could have a normal life. I read everything I could find about sheep behavior online. I tried leaving him in the pasture overnight, thinking maybe without me around, the others would accept him. But I found him in the morning standing alone at the gate with fresh cuts on his face, where the rams had budded him. I tried introducing him to just the younger sheep, thinking they might be gentler, but they ignored him completely, treating him like he was invisible. It was heartbreaking to watch. One afternoon in early June, I was cleaning out the barn office when I found a box I hadn't noticed before. It was shoved behind a filing cabinet, dusty and unremarkable. Inside were letters, photographs, documents that had yellowed with age. I spread them out on Harriet's desk and started to read. The letters were from decades ago. Some were addressed to Harriet from foster care agencies. Others were from lawyers handling various administrative matters. But the photographs were what stopped me cold. There was her as a young woman, mid-1819, Standery farmhouse. The paint was fresh, the porch wasn't sagging, and she was smiling with a kind of fierce pride that I recognized in my own mirror sometimes. There were other photos of her at different ages, always alone, always with sheep somewhere in the background. And then there was one photograph that made the world stop. Harriet at 15 or 16, standing in a group of teenagers. The building, institutionnel, Painfamilia, and on the wall, barely visible, in the corner of the frame, was a sign I would recognize anywhere. SD, Catherine's Home for Children. I dropped the photograph. My hands were shaking too badly to hold it. Harriet had grown up at St. Catherine's, the same St. Catherine's, my St. Catherine's. I picked up the photograph again and studied the building in the background. The windows were the same. The front steps were the same. Even the old oaky tree in the corner of the frame, the one I used to sit under when I needed to be alone, was there. Smaller, younger, but unmistakably the same tree. She'd walked the same hallways I walked, slept in the same kinds of beds, eaten in the same cafeteria with its flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial food. She'd probably sat under that same oak tree 60 years before me, feeling just as lost and alone as I had felt. And then she'd walked out those doors with nothing, just like I did. and she'd built this. I sank down onto the dusty floor of the barn office and cried harder than I'd cried since arriving at this farm. Not sad tears, not even happy tears. Exactly. These were tears of recognition, of connection across time. Harriet hadn't chosen the next child from St. Catherine's at random. She'd chosen me because she knew. She knew what it felt like to stand on those front steps with a bag of belongings and no one waiting for you. She knew the particular loneliness of that place. The way hope dies slowly over years of being passed over and sent back. She knew because she'd survived it, and she wanted me to know that survival was possible, that you could take the worst beginning imaginable and turn it into something beautiful. At the bottom of the box, I found a letter she'd written to herself. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but I could still make out the words. Today, I own land. Nobody can take it from me. Nobody can tell me I don't belong here. I built this with my own hands, from nothing, and it's mine. Someday, I'm going to give someone else this chance. Someone who knows what it feels like to have nothing. Someone who will understand what this place really means. Someone from St. Catherine's, if I can manage it. Because that's where it started for me. And that's where I want it to continue. She'd planned this for decades. She'd been waiting for me before I was even born. There were hard lessons, too. In late May, I lost a ewe to complications from a difficult birth. Her name was Clover. And despite everything I did, despite calling Dr. Bellamy and following every instruction, she slipped away in the early hours of the morning while I held her head in my lap. But she left behind a lamb, a tiny ram with spindly legs, and a cry that sounded almost human in its desperation. He screamed for his mother constantly, refused to eat, and grew weaker by the hour. I walked the floors with him, wrapped in a blanket like a human baby, trying everything to get him to take the bottle. Nothing worked. He turned his head away, bleeding for someone who would never come back. On the second day, when I was sure I was going to lose him, too, I brought him out to the barn where Walter was. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just needed to not be alone with this dying lamb. But something changed when the little ram saw Walter. He stopped crying. His small body, which had been rigid with distress, relaxed slightly. He looked at this other sheep, who seemed so comfortable around humans, and some ancient instinct recognized safety. He took the bottle that afternoon, his first real feeding since his mother died. From that moment on, the lamb bonded to Walter the same way Walter had bonded to Harriet all those years ago. He followed Walter everywhere, slept curled against his wool, cried if they were separated for even a few minutes. It was like Walter, finally, had someone who accepted him completely. Someone who didn't care that he was different. Someone who loved him simply because he was there. I named the little ram Scout because he was always exploring, always curious, always venturing a few steps ahead before running back to Walter for reassurance. Watching them together, I understood something important. Sometimes the misfits find each other and create their own kind of family. Walter had been alone his whole life, rejected by his own kind. And now he had Scout, a lamb who needed a father, and found one in the most unlikely place. They became inseparable, and somewhere along the way, they became mine. Summer brought warmth and growth, but it also brought Preston Calloway's lawyers. The lawsuit arrived in August. Official papers claiming that Harriet had been of unsound mind when she wrote her will. That no rational person would leave everything to a stranger when family members existed. I read through the documents in Vivian's office, my hands steady, even as my heart raced. Can they win? The legal basis is weak, Vivian said. But like I told you before, Preston can afford to make this expensive. The goal is necessary now. That's some week, I go back. Harriet had taken out a loan 2 years before her death to buy new equipment, $15,000, which she'd been paying down steadily. But now, the payments were my responsibility. If I couldn't keep up, the bank could take the property. I sat at Harriet's kitchen table that night, going over the numbers. The savings account she'd left me was substantial, but between operating costs, lawyer fees, and loan payments, it was disappearing faster than I'd expected. The wool from the spring shearing had brought in some money. The lambs I'd raised for market would bring in more, but it wasn't enough. Not if the lawsuit dragged on. Not if anything else went wrong. Something else went wrong. In early September, a respiratory infection swept through part of the flock. I don't know where it came from. Maybe from equipment I'd borrowed. Maybe from someone who'd visited the farm. Maybe from wild animals that had gotten too close to the pastures. It didn't matter where it came from. What mattered was that my sheep were sick, and some of them were dying. I spent 2 weeks essentially living in the barn, administering antibiotics and monitoring temperatures. Dr. Bellamy came out 3 times, helping me isolate the sick animals and adjust treatment protocols. This isn't your fault, she told me one exhausted evening. Even experienced farmers deal with outbreaks. The important thing is how you respond. But it still felt like failure, like I'd let Harriet down. I lost 5 sheep, 5 animals that had trusted me to keep them safe. I buried them at the edge of the property, in a spot where Harriet had buried animals before. And then I sat in the barn with Walter and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. That was when Preston came back. He pulled up in his expensive car on a grey afternoon when I was cleaning out the pens where the sick sheep had been. I was exhausted and heartbroken and in no mood for whatever he'd come to say, but he said it anyway. I heard about your little epidemic. He leaned against his car with his arms crossed, watching me with an expression that was almost amused. Such a shame. What do you want? The same thing I wanted before, for you to see reason. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, $10,000 cash. Take it and walk away. No lo suis. No more fighting. Just take the money and go back to wherever you came from. I stared at the envelope in his hand. $10,000. More money than I'd ever had in my life. Enough to start over somewhere else. Enough to escape this struggle that seemed to be getting harder every day. This is more than you've ever had, isn't it? Preston's voice was almost gentle. More than anyone ever gave you. All you have to do is sign the papers, and it's yours. For one terrible moment, I actually considered it. I was so tired, so scared, so overwhelmed by everything that had gone wrong. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't belong here. Then I looked past Preston toward the barn. Walter was standing at the fence watching us, his dark eyes fixed on mine like he was waiting to see what I would decide. I thought about Harriet, about a girl who aged out of St. Catherine's with nothing, who built this place from scratch, who chose to leave it to someone she'd never met, someone who would understand what it meant to have nothing and be given everything. I thought about what she would have done if someone had offered her money to walk away. No. Preston's eyebrows rose. No. No. I pointed toward the driveway. Get off my property. His expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He got back in his car and drove away. I watched until the dust settled. Then I walked out to the fence where Walter was waiting and buried my face in his wool. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. Walter made a soft sound and pressed his head against my chest. We stood there until the sun went down. In October, Walter got sick. The respiratory infection I thought we'd beaten had lingered in his system. And because he'd been bottle-fed, his immune system was weaker than the other sheep's. I noticed the change in him on a Tuesday morning. He was lying down when he should have been standing. His breathing was labored. He wouldn't eat. Dr. Bellamy came that afternoon and examined him with a careful thoroughness that told me she was worried. "His lungs are compromised," she said finally. "Not meeting my the infections taken hold what can we do? I'll give him antibiotics, fluids. Make him comfortable." She paused. "But Ren, you need to prepare yourself. Sheep this week. With an infection this severe, the survival rate isn't good." I didn't cry. "Not yet. How long?" "If he makes it through the week, he has a chance. If not..." She didn't finish the sentence. I spent the next 7 days in Walter's pen. I brought blankets and pillows and a lantern. I slept on the straw beside him. I fed him water from my hand drop by drop whenever he would take it. I talked to him constantly about everything and nothing because I couldn't bear the silence. I told him about Harriet and how she'd saved him when his mother rejected him. I told him about my own mother, whoever she was. A woman who'd given birth to me and then vanished. A woman whose face I'd never seen and whose voice I'd never heard. I told him I understood what it felt like to be thrown away. "You're not alone," I whispered, my face pressed against his wool. "You have me, and I'm not going anywhere. You just have to hold on, okay? You just have to fight." On the 3rd day, he stopped eating entirely. On the 4th day, he couldn't stand. On the 5th day, I lay beside him in the straw and sobbed, convinced I was going to lose the only creature who had ever felt like family. Scout wouldn't leave Walter's side. The young ram lay pressed against his father's body, bleeding softly, as if trying to give him strength. "Please," I begged, not even sure who I was begging. "Please don't take him. He's all I have." On the 6th day, something changed. Walter opened his eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me the way he used to before he got sick. On the 7th day, he stood up. By the end of the 2nd week, he was eating again, drinking, following me around the barn like nothing had happened. Dr. Bellamy came to check on him and couldn't explain it. "I've seen a lot of animals in my career," she said, shaking her head. "But I've never seen one fight this hard to stay alive." I knew why he'd fought. He fought because I asked him to. Because I needed him. Because sometimes that's enough. Walter almost died. But he didn't. Because sometimes love is stronger than science. And sometimes the ones who've been rejected fight the hardest to hold on. Have you ever loved something so much that you do anything to keep it alive? A pet, a person, a dream that everyone said was impossible? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe if you haven't already, because what Ren finds in part 3 changes everything. A secret hidden in the basement, a letter from the past, and a visitor who proves that family isn't always about blood. The best part of this story is still to come. February of my 2nd year on the farm. The lawsuit was still dragging on, eating through my savings like a slow disease. I needed to find something, anything that might help. That's when I decided to clean out the basement. It was one of those projects I'd been putting off forever. The basement was dark and damp, and filled with decades of accumulated stuff. Old farming equipment, furniture that had seen better days, boxes of papers, and photographs that no one had looked through in years. I thought maybe I could find something to sell, something valuable that Harriet had forgotten about. What I found was so much more. The safe was hidden behind a stack of moldy boxes, rusted and unremarkable. I almost missed it entirely, but something made me push those boxes aside, made me kneel down in the dust and try to figure out how to open it. The combination lock was frozen with age. I was about to give up when I remembered something Vivian had mentioned once, that Harriet had kept important documents in her home. I called Vivian and asked if she knew the combination. Try her birthday. Vivian said, October 7th, 1946. It worked. Inside the safe, I found papers, land deeds, purchase agreements, financial records from 1979. The year Harriet bought the farm, everything documented, everything in her name alone. And I found a letter. It was handwritten, dated 30 years earlier, and it was addressed to Harriet from her brother. The brother I hadn't known existed. The letter was from someone named Thomas Calloway, Preston's grandfather. Harriet, the letter began. I know we haven't spoken in years. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to put this in writing because I've been carrying this guilt for too long. The letter went on to explain that Thomas felt responsible for how their relationship had fallen apart, that he'd been jealous of Harriet's success, that he'd said things he regretted. But the crucial part came near the end. I want to be clear about something in case it ever becomes an issue. The farm is yours. You bought it yourself with money you earned. It was never family land. Our parents left us nothing. Everything you have, you build on your own. No one else has any claim to it, and I would testify to that in court if I ever needed to. The letter was signed by Thomas Calloway, and it was notarized. I held the letter in my trembling hands and realized what it meant. Preston's entire lawsuit was based on the claim that the farm was family property, that Harriet had inherited it and therefore should have passed it on to family. But his own grandfather had admitted in writing that this wasn't true. I called Vivian immediately. 3 weeks later, we were in court. The judge reviewed the documents, the land deeds showing Harriet as the sole purchaser, the financial records proving she'd paid for everything herself, and the letter from Thomas Calloway destroying his grandson's argument from the inside. Preston's lawyers tried to object. They claimed the letter might be forged. They asked for delays and additional hearings. The judge denied every request. The evidence is clear, she said. Looking directly at Preston, Ms. Calloway acquired this property through her own efforts and resources. She had every right to dispose of it as she saw fit. This case is dismissed. I don't remember much about what happened immediately after. I know Vivian hugged me. I know I cried. I know Preston stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me. I drove back to the farm in a daze, pulled into the driveway, and sat there staring at the house I now knew beyond any legal doubt was mine. Walter was at the fence when I got out of the car. I walked over to him and wrapped my arms around his neck. We did it, I whispered. We're staying. The money Preston was ordered to pay covered most of my legal fees and the wool from that year's shearing. Combined with the lambs I sold to local restaurants, was enough to pay off the last of Harriet's equipment loan. By autumn of my second year, for the first time since I had inherited this place, I wasn't drowning in debt. I wasn't fighting for survival. I was free to build something new. The summer, after the lawsuit ended, I finally had time to breathe, to think about something beyond just surviving. That's when I started the program. It was early, in my 3rd year on the farm, and for the first time since I had arrived. I wasn't fighting for the right to stay. I was building something that would last. I'd been thinking about it for months. About all those kids at St. Catherine's who never got to experience anything like this farm. About what it might have meant to me as a child to have a place to escape to have animals who didn't judge me or abandon me. I called Director Holloway, the administrator at St. Catherine's, and explained my idea. Farm visits, I said. A few hours on Saturday afternoons, the kids could interact with the animals. See a different environment, just have a place where they can breathe. He was enthusiastic. We've seen research on the benefits of animal therapy. Most of our kids have never been on a farm. This could be really meaningful for them. We started small, 3 kids at a time with a staff member supervising. It was chaos at first. Some of the children were terrified of the sheep. Others were too rough, grabbing at wool and chasing animals until I had to intervene. I spent the first few sessions wondering if this was a terrible idea, but Walter changed everything. He seemed to understand exactly what these kids needed. He was gentle with the frightened ones, standing perfectly still while they slowly worked up the courage to touch him. He was patient with the aggressive ones, not flinching when they pulled at his wool or shouted too loud. And he had this way of just being present that calmed everyone down. There was a boy named Declan who came with one of the early groups. He was 10 years old in foster care, and he had the weary eyes of a kid who had learned not to expect good things. He stood at the edge of the group during activities, never participating, watching everything with a guarded expression. His foster mother, Marlene, explained quietly that they'd been fostering Declan for 6 months. He'd been removed from his home due to neglect, bounced through 3 placements before landing with them. He was having a hard time trusting that this family would be any different. I knelt down next to Declan near the end of the visit. "You see that sheep over there?" I pointed at Walter, who was standing at the fence watching us. His name is Walter. When he was a baby, his mother rejected him. Wouldn't feed him, wouldn't take care of him. The woman who owned this farm before me, she bottle-fed him, raised him herself. Declan didn't respond, but he was listening. The thing is, the other sheep never accepted him. They knew he was different. They treated him like he didn't belong. I paused, but he found his place anyway. He found people who cared about him. And now, he's one of the most important animals on this farm. Declan looked at Walter for a long moment. "Can I pet him?" "Of course." I opened the gate and Walter walked right up to Declan. And then he did something I'd only seen him do a handful of times. He pressed his head against the boy's chest and just stayed there. Declan froze. His hands hovered in the air like he wasn't sure what to do. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around Walter's neck and he started to cry. Marlene was crying too. I had to turn away so no one would see, the tears streaming down my own face. After that day, Declan came to the farm every other weekend. He helped with small chores, feeding the chickens I'd acquired, collecting eggs, brushing Walter, and Scout. He never talked much, but he didn't have to. I understood what he was feeling because I'd felt it, too. Marlene told me later that Declan had nightmares almost every night before he started visiting the farm. But after a few months of coming here, the nightmares stopped. He started sleeping through the night, for the first time in years. "It's like he finally found something to believe in," she said, "something that won't let him down." The program grew. Marquis Camte's help. Tessa, now engaged to Silas, helped me apply for grants to expand the operation. We received funding from a foundation that supported therapeutic programs for foster children. I hired Marlene part-time to help coordinate visits since she had training as a youth counselor. And I discovered that I wasn't just saving a farm anymore. I was building something that mattered. In the autumn of my second year, I got a letter that changed everything again. It came from a law office in Portland, Maine. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman named Celeste Calloway. She was Harriet's niece, the daughter of Harriet's brother, Thomas. The one who'd written the letter that saved my farm. Celeste had spent years trying to find her aunt. She'd grown up hearing stories about Harriet, about the woman who had disappeared into farming after aging out of foster care. But by the time Celeste tracked her down through property records, Harriet had been dead for months. She'd found my name from the estate filing and wanted to reach out. "I don't want anything from you," she wrote. The will was clear, and I respect my aunt's wishes completely. But I thought you might want to know more about her. And I thought maybe we could connect because, in a way, through Harriet, we're the closest thing to family either of us has. The letter came with photographs. Harriet, as a young woman standing in front of this farmhouse when the paint was fresh. Harriet at different ages, always alone, always with sheep somewhere in the background. And one photograph that confirmed what I'd already discovered. Harriet at 15 or 16 standing in a group photo at St. Catherine's Home for Children. I wrote back to Celeste that same day. I told her everything about the farm, about Walter and Scout, about the program for kids from the foster system, about how I was trying to honor what Harriet built while making it my own. I told her she was welcome to visit anytime. She came 2 weeks later with her husband Derek and their 2 boys, ages 7 and 9. I watched her face as she walked around the property, the tears in her eyes when she saw the barn where her aunt had worked for decades. The way she touched the kitchen table like she could feel Harriet's presence there. She told me stories I'd never heard about how Harriet had sent money to Celeste's father every Christmas, even when they weren't speaking regularly. About how she'd shown up at Celeste's college graduation, a quiet figure in the back row, gone before Celeste could thank her. She never had children of her own, Celeste said, but she watched over our family from a distance. She cared more than she ever let on. Derek noticed the barn roof was failing in one section and offered to help fix it before winter. The boys fell in love with Walter and Scout, spending hours in the pasture while the sheep tolerated their enthusiastic attention. Before they left, Celeste hugged me tight. "She would be so proud of you," she whispered. "Not just for keeping the farm, for making it into something more. For helping kids who needed it the way she needed it once." I couldn't speak, could barely see through the tears. After their car disappeared down the driveway, I sat on the porch steps with Walter at my feet and Scout curled up beside him. And I understood something I'd been too scared to believe before. I wasn't alone anymore. The girl's name was Juniper. And when I first saw her, something in my chest tightened with recognition. She was 11 years old, recently removed from her home due to neglect. Tiny for her age, with tangled hair and clothes that didn't fit right. She showed up with one of the groups from St. Catherine's in the spring of my 3rd year, and she stood at the edge of everything, not participating. Watching with an expression that was completely blank. I knew that blankness, it was armor. It was how you protected yourself when you'd learned that caring about things only led to pain. After the structured activities ended and the other kids were playing with Scout in the pasture, I found Juniper sitting alone by Walter's pen. She wasn't trying to interact with him, just sitting there. And Walter was standing on his side of the fence, watching her with those knowing eyes. I sat down next to her without saying anything. We stayed like that for a few minutes before she spoke. "Does that sheep live by himself?" Her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. "His name is Walter," I said. "He was rejected when he was a baby. His mother wouldn't take care of him, so a woman named Harriet raised him instead. And because of that, the other sheep never really accepted him. They knew he was different." Juniper was quiet for a moment. "So he's alone?" "He was for a long time, but now he has Scout and me and all the kids who come to visit." I paused. "Sometimes it takes a while to find where you belong. But that doesn't mean you won't find it eventually." Juniper turned to look at me. Really look at me, for the first time since she'd arrived. "I don't fit in anywhere either." My heart cracked open. "I know," I said softly. "I felt the same way my whole life until I came here. What changed?" I thought about how to answer. Auto-explanada, and then decided a place to belong. "I stopped trying to fit into places that weren't meant for me," I said finally. "And I found a place that was." Juniper looked at Walter again. "Can I pet him?" "Of course." I opened the pen gate. Walter didn't walk up to her the way he did with most visitors. Instead, he lay down in the straw, lowering himself to her level, making himself small, non-threatening. Juniper stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she crawled over and sat beside him, her small body pressed against his warm wool. She didn't pet him. She just leaned into him and closed her eyes. They stayed like that for nearly an hour, not moving, barely breathing. When she finally stood up, there were tears on her cheeks, but she was almost smiling. Juniper came back every week after that, always gravitating to Walter, talking to him constantly, telling him things she couldn't tell the adults in her life. I worked nearby, listening, sometimes offering a word or two when it seemed right. Her foster mother, Rachel, called me one evening, her voice thick with emotion. "She spoke to me today," Rachel said. "Really spoke, for the first time since she came to live with us. She told me about Walter, about how he was rejected, too. About how he found his family. Anyway," Rachel paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "She said she wants to be like him, strong enough to keep going even when no one wants you." I had to sit down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. This is why Harriet did it, I thought. This is why she left everything to a stranger. Because sometimes the best way to save yourself is to save someone else. By autumn of my 3rd year, Juniper was helping me with Walter's care, brushing him, checking his hooves, mixing his feed. She had a natural gentleness with animals and an intuition about their needs that couldn't really be taught. She understood them, and they understood her. Scout, who was cautious with most people, would let Juniper lead him around the pasture. He came running when she called his name, something he didn't do for anyone else. Watching her blossom from that scared, silent girl into someone confident and purposeful reminded me of my own transformation. And it made me understand what Harriet had really given me. Not just a farm, not just a second chance, a purpose. Christmas of my 3rd year on the farm was unlike any Christmas I'd ever experienced. I'd invited everyone who had become important to me. Hank and his wife, with her famous apple pie. Tessa and Silas, who had gotten married that fall, in a ceremony I'd attended with tears in my eyes. Opal and her husband, Dr. Bellamy, and her family. Marlene came with Declan, who was 13 now and had grown 6 in the past year. He was still quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet now. The quiet of someone who felt safe. Juniper came with Rachel, carrying a handmade card she'd made for Walter. And Celeste came with Derek and the boys. Driving down from Portland to spend the holiday. The farmhouse was crowded and loud, and absolutely perfect. After dinner, everyone bundled up and walked out to the barn where I'd set up lights and heat lamps so we could visit the animals without freezing. The sheep were settled in for the night, peaceful and content. Walter and Scout were in their usual spot near the office door, watching this gathering of humans with what I swear was satisfaction in their eyes. Celeste raised her mug of hot cider and made a toast. To Harriet, she said, who built this place from nothing, and to Wren, who kept it alive and made it into something even more beautiful than it was before. Everyone drank. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but managed to hold them back. Then Declan spoke up. He was standing near Walter's pen, and his voice was steadier than I'd ever heard it. Coming to this farm changed my life, he said. I didn't trust anyone when I first came here. I thought every good thing would get taken away, like always. But Walter showed me that it's okay to be different. That's sometimes pittineru kidat moisavor. Thank you for not giving up on any of us. Juniper nodded beside him, her hand resting on Walter's head. Walter taught me that being different doesn't mean being worthless, she said softly. Sometimes the ones who don't fit anywhere turn out to be exactly where they're supposed to be. Walter made a soft bleeding sound as if he understood he was being talked about. Then Scout joined in louder and more insistent. And then every sheep in the barn started bleeding, creating a chorus that echoed off the walls and made everyone laugh through their tears. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, I sat down at Harriet's kitchen table. The same table where she must have sat countless times, planning her days, worrying about money, writing letters to herself about dreams she barely dared to have. I took out a piece of paper and a pen, and I wrote my own letter. To whoever finds this when I'm gone, this farm is more than land and animals. It's proof that second chances are real. That kindness can echo across time. That the people who've been rejected and forgotten can build something meaningful if someone just gives them the opportunity. Harriet understood that. Je l'avais dit. And then she passed it on to me. I've tried to do the same. To help kids who needed what I needed. To give them a place where they could breathe, where they could be themselves, where they could learn that being different isn't the same as being broken. If you're reading this, know that you belong here. Know that you're worthy of this place. Know that someone believed in you before they ever met you. Keep this circle going. With love, Wren. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the safe alongside Harriet's documents and Thomas's letter. Then I walked outside into the cold December night. The stars were impossibly bright above the farm. The kind of brightness you only see in places far from cities where the darkness is real and complete. Walter was waiting at the fence as if he'd known I would come. I climbed over and sat down beside him in the frost-covered grass. Scout came over too, pressing his warm body against my other side. The three of us sat there together, looking out at the sleeping farm, the pastures where new lambs would be born in spring. The barn that had witnessed so much joy and so much pain, the house with lights glowing in the windows, waiting for me to come back inside. I thought about the girl I used to be, 19 years old, sitting in a church parking lot, certain that her life was over before it had really begun. I thought about Harriet, who had been that girl, too, who had taken her pain and transformed it into something beautiful. I thought about all the children who had walked through this barn. Declan learning to trust again, Juniper finding her voice. Dozens of others, whose names I knew by heart, whose faces I would never forget. They had come here broken, and they had left with hope. Because a woman they'd never met had left her farm to a stranger, because that stranger had decided to keep the door open. Because sometimes love isn't about blood or history or obligation. Sometimes it's about choosing to care for someone simply because they need to be cared for. The next spring, Juniper would graduate from middle school and ask if she could spend her summer working at the farm. She'd grow taller and stronger, her quiet confidence blooming like the flowers in Harriet's garden. Declan would start talking about becoming a veterinarian. Dr. Bellamy would take him under her wing, letting him shadow her on farm calls, teaching him things that couldn't be learned from books. The program would expand. More kids, more healing, more proof that kindness, once planted, grows in ways you could never predict. Celeste would bring her family every holiday, and her boys would grow up knowing this farm as a second home. Derek would teach me how to maintain the barn roof myself. We'd become the family Harriet never had and always wanted. And Walter would grow old, surrounded by love, by Scout, who never left his side, by the children who came to tell him their secrets, by me, the girl who had arrived with nothing and found everything. He'd lived to be 14, ancient for a sheep. And when he finally passed peacefully on a warm spring morning, I'd bury him beside Harriet's grave on the hill overlooking the farm. The stone I'd placed there would say simply, Walter. He taught us that being different means being special, but that was still years away. For now, in this moment, we were together. The rejected sheep and the rejected girl and the farm that had saved us both. I buried my face in Walter's wool and breathed in his familiar scent. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. He made a soft sound in response. The same sound he'd made the first day I met him when we were both alone and scared and uncertain about the future. The sound that meant, I'm here, I see you. You're not alone. I stayed out there with Walter and Scout until the cold became too much to bear. Then I walked back to the house that Harriet had built, the house that was mine now. The house that would someday belong to someone else who needed it. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the barn. Home, I thought, not just a place, a feeling. The feeling of being exactly where you're supposed to be. Of doing exactly what you're meant to do. Of belonging to something larger than yourself. Harriet had given me that gift. Now, it was my turn to pass it on. If you've made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This channel exists because of people like you. People who believe in second chances. People who know that family isn't always about blood. People who understand that sometimes the most broken among us have the most love to give. If this story touched you, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And please leave a comment telling me about your own story. Have you ever found belonging in an unexpected place? Have you ever been given a chance that changed your life? Your stories matter, every single one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about Ren and Walter and Harriet and all the children who found their way to that farm. Until next time. Remember, you belong somewhere. You matter to someone, and it's never too late to find your way home.